Today your task is to be Franklin Roosevelt. It is the middle of World War II, and you have been receiving some very disturbing information, some intelligence from behind German lines in Europe. And the intelligence tells you that Jews have been rounded up from Germany, from countries under German control, including the Netherlands, France. And they have been shipped to camps. At these camps, it had been pretty well known that the Jews were placed in factories and mines, and they were forced to work. But the intelligence that you have been receiving lately indicates that more was involved. That these camps were not simply slave labor camps, not simply concentration camps, these were death camps. And that the purpose of the camps was to kill the Jews, to kill as many Jews as possible. This is what you have heard. At first, the intelligence is mostly hearsay. And some of it comes from parties who might have an interest in getting a certain message across. You, Franklin Roosevelt, were in the administration of Woodrow Wilson during World War I. And you know that you remember that British intelligence fed disinformation to the United States regarding what the Germans had done, especially in Belgium, in the early part of the war. And that German atrocities, that babies had been bayoneted in their bassinets in hospitals, and other horrible things like this, which had created an understandable uproar in the West, in the United States and other countries. These proved to have been false. The British were hoping to get the United States to come into the war against Germany. And after the war, it became apparent that these reports were not true. And partly as a result of this, Americans after the war turned against the whole war effort. They turned their back on Europe. You thought after the war that this was a bad idea that Americans did turn their backs, but you sort of understood the political dynamics. So as president, you don't want to get suckered by any more misinformation, more disinformation. So you're pretty slow. You're going to be careful about this. You're not going to be drawn into anything before you know what it is that is drawing you in. Time passes, and more intelligence comes your way, including eyewitness reports, people who have managed to escape the death camps. And they bring word out of exactly what is going on. So you get this new information. Again, you cannot be absolutely sure, but by this time, it's pretty clear that the preponderance of evidence is on the side of those who say that the purpose of these camps is to murder Jews. So, President Franklin Roosevelt, what are you going to do about it? You ask your advisors, so what are my alternatives? And they say you could denounce the program, the death program. Although you better be careful, because since we don't have any evidence that we can share, maybe you could put it in conditional terms. So if it is known that civilians are being killed, deliberately targeted, then those people responsible will be made to pay for their crimes against humanity. So you could put it that way. So your response can be primarily rhetorical. Say things. Give warnings. If this is demonstrated to have happened, those responsible will pay. Now, this doesn't look like a lot, but it's something. At least it acknowledges that the United States government is aware that this might be going on and that it will do something about it. So the criminal perpetrators can't think they're going to get off scot-free. So Alternative one is you can make speeches about it. You can give written statements. That's number one. Number two, and this is, well, for this one, you're going to have to talk very closely to your military advisors. And that is that some military resources can be directed to stopping what is happening at the death camps. So it appears that the inmates of the death camps, the prisoners taken, are shipped to the death camps by train. So American and the British, if they'll go along with it, we can use military resources. We can use planes to bomb the railway lines or particularly important junctions. Conceivably, we could send in teams of commandos, but these are far behind enemy lines, so that would be really risky. So possibility is to stop the death camps from doing any worse than they're already doing. So try to cut them off from the outside world. Alternative three is maybe even it's a bigger deal than this, and it's got all sorts of aspects that are very fraught, but another possibility is simply to bomb the death camps. Now, this presumably is going to mean killing a lot of the inmates of the death camps, and then, is their blood going to be on American hands at this point? But comes the rejoinder, well, look, the whole point of the death camps is they're going to be killed anyway. If you don't do anything, they're going to be dead. If you do something and you kill some of them, but you destroy sort of the engines of destruction, the ovens in which they are killed, the containment places where they are gassed, and then the ovens where they are cremated. At least it'll stop this from going forward. So maybe those people are already there. They're as bad as dead anyway. But if you destroy these as these sort of factories of death, then they can't kill any more people. So these are your alternatives. Well, I suppose, no, the other alternative is just do nothing at all. Just pretend you never heard this. So, Franklin Roosevelt, what are you going to do? Do nothing? Give speeches? Target the rail lines that are going in? Target the camps themselves? What do you do? Well, as usual, I'm going to tell you what Franklin Roosevelt did. He didn't ignore the intelligence. He did give speeches. And he made very clear, repeatedly, that anyone involved in the deliberate killing, deliberate destruction of non-combatants will be held responsible and will be brought before the appropriate tribunals after the war, or whenever we are able to do that. So the speeches are there. But he did not order American planes to particularly target rail lines and rail depots leading to the camps. And he did not give orders to bomb the death camps themselves. So, this is what he did. How did it turn out? Well, I guess I should add something. So, his reasoning went something like this. Why not try to target the rail lines? He had it on good military advice that, first of all, a single rail line is hard to hit from the air. It could take hundreds or thousands of bombs to knock out a rail line. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even if you do knock out the rail line, in 24 hours it can be replaced. So the United States would have to devote a number of planes and crews simply to keep bombing the rail lines. It's not a one-time thing. So he thought that bombing the rail lines, even bombing the depots, would have no lasting effect. And this is crucial, it would divert resources from the overall campaign against Germany. Though the war has turned in America, the Allies' favor, and it's only a matter of time before the Nazi regime is destroyed. And from this perspective, this is the position Roosevelt takes, this is the position that Roosevelt's military advisors take. The best way to save the inhabitants, the inmates of the death camps, and any more who might come, is to end the war against Germany as swiftly as possible. They pointed out that, again, the problem with blowing up the rail lines, they don't stay blown up. The problem with bombing the camps and the facilities there, well, those would be harder to replace quickly. But a couple of other problems arise if you do that. Now, the first is, if the Germans are bent on killing Jews, as they quite clearly are, they don't need these special death camps. They can just round up the prisoners and machine gun them all. Okay, it's a little bit messier to do it this way. It's harder to keep the civilian German population from knowing this. These camps, as far as most people in Germany knew, were just, okay, the Jews are going in there, they're being contained there, but nobody knew what was happening to them when they were there. At least people who didn't want to know could say they didn't know. But anyway, if the Germans are determined simply to kill as many Jews as possible, they can just use machine guns. They don't have to have these special camps. But there was another angle on this, and that is that if American planes bomb the death camps, they will certainly kill Jews. And it would not be out of the question for those apologists for the Hitler regime, either then or in the future, to say, we didn't kill the Jews. It was those American planes and bombs that killed the Jews. Now, nobody in those days was thinking of the concept of Holocaust denial. People saying that this never happened, because as soon as the war is over, it's really clear that this happened. But Roosevelt was concerned enough about the abilities of people to talk themselves into things they want to believe, to think that this was not out of the realm of possibility. And if there is actual physical evidence that American planes killed some of the Jews, it would be much easier for the Holocaust deniers to say the American planes killed all the Jews. So what Roosevelt did was to say yes to the speeches, no to the bombing the rail lines, no to bombing the camps. The war ended. In an Allied victory. The camps were liberated. This is the first time that American observers had eyewitness observation of what had been going on there. And it was more horrible than Roosevelt had been able to conclude on the basis of the evidence that he'd received. There were plenty of people who thought, okay, oh man, the United States should have done more. Now, actually, I should say something. Roosevelt was not still alive when the war against Germany ended. So Roosevelt himself didn't see the photographs coming from the death camps. He died in April 1945. The death camps were liberated starting in May 1945. But other people did. Other people saw this. And other people began to second-guess Roosevelt. Would Roosevelt have second-guessed himself? Would he have said, I should have done more? It's hard to say. When you have seen the evidence with your own eyes or own photographs that you can see yourself, then the immediacy of the horrors of the Holocaust become evident. But would Roosevelt have changed his mind that the fastest way to save as many Jewish lives as possible is to end the war against Germany as quickly as possible? I don't know. I don't know what he would have said. But there it is.